Book of Matthew, chapter 18 and verse 21. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times.
It ain't nowhere that I can't go. You see me, you see him, I'm like children in the flame though. It's because I follow him though. He the light to my feet, it's like flames what I follow. But let me stop for you heathos. I've been crossed many times, so yes, I know the pain, yo. And forgive is where I ain't go. Told the brother get in line, giving shots like a needle. I've been sinning for real, murder, but I ain't killed for real. Shot for shot to seal the deal. Now I'm here to swallow the pill. Now I'm woozy, don't know how to act. Devil is mine, don't fully attack. My spirit to flesh had taken it back, and I ain't thinking about bringing it back. Tap, tap, I think I ain't hear it right. The Lord come like a thief at night, but I ain't believe the hype. Yeah, like Saul when I seen the night, but had me feeling like Paul when I found the light. Cap, 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 cap. You say you love your people, but that's cap, cap, cap. You swear you don't be lying, but that's cap, cap, cap. You say you did atonement, but that's cap, cap, cap. I say cap, 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 cap. You say you love your nation, but that's cap, cap, cap. You swear you done with envy, but that's cap, cap, cap. You say you did atonement, but that's cap, cap, cap. I say.
So Peter said, if a brother sin against me, he offended, he does something unlawful, could have took your money, could have tail beared again, any of those types. How many times should I forgive? 7 times? Because 7 was a complete number. What did the matter?
Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7.
All right, shalom, family. Most High in Christ bless. We are in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to touch on a little bit on the stuff we went over for Passover, and then we're going to get right into it. So to my left is
Brother Jeremiah.
Just in case y'all don't know, I call him Jeremiah Yisrael. I love this brother. So, you know, you always, people you love, you have fun with them. So let's get started. Let's go back to Exodus 12. And give me verse 8. I'm just going to make a little point real quick as we're getting started.
The book of Exodus, chapter 12, and verse 8. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it.
Right, so these are some ordinances that's associated with Passover. Now it says unleavened bread. So you eat unleavened bread with the bitter herbs and the lamb that's roasted with fire right here for Passover. Now, chapter 12 and 37.
Book of Exodus, chapter 12 and verse 37. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men beside children.
Right, so at this point, the Passover is over, and we're leaving out of Egypt, we're journeying from Ramses, not out of the land of Egypt, but we're leaving from where we were, journeying from Ramses, and we're going to go to Succoth. Go ahead.
Verse 38, and a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks, and herds, even very much cattle.
Go ahead.
And they baked unleavened cakes.
Hold on right there. They baked unleavened cakes, which is different from unleavened bread. It's unleavened cakes. You can go to the Blue Letter or the Strongs and look it up. It's cakes here. It's not regular bread. It's cakes. They baked unleavened cakes. Go ahead.
And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt.
Which they brought forth out of Egypt. So we did not keep Feast of Unleavened Bread in Ramses or wherever it was that we were being held captive. It's like 3 different cities. Go ahead.
For it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt.
See, we were thrust out of Egypt. It was not leavened. Go ahead.
And could not tarry. Neither had they prepared for themselves any victual.
Right, come on.
Verse 40. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel, who dwelt in Egypt, was 430 years. And it came to pass, at the end of 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt.
Right, this is the 15th. Like when you go to Numbers 33, it'll tell you. And then when you're reading in 12, the 14th at even, meaning the end of the 14th day, you're going to start unleavened bread. So, and matter of fact, when you're reading in 12, when Moses gives the ordinances for the children to kill the Passover, they mention nothing about the Feast of Unleavened Bread and keeping it 7 days. There's no mention of that right there. All right, go ahead. Verse
42.
42.
Verse 42. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord.
Right, it is a night. So we went forth out of Egypt, and it says it is a night much to be observed. So the next night, not on the 14th, on the 15th, we went out from Egypt. Go ahead.
For bringing them out from the land of Egypt. That is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations.
Right, the night that we were brought out. We were not brought out on the night of Passover. The firstborn of man and beast were being destroyed on the night of Passover. We could not leave out of our houses the night of Passover. So go to, just read 51 and we'll be done with Exodus chapter 12.
Verse 51. And it came to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies.
All right, so now we're going into chapter 13. And the Lord's going to speak to Moses again concerning unleavened bread. Start at verse 1.
Book of Exodus chapter 13 and verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine.
Go ahead.
And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt.
So remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt. That day we came out of Egypt is the 15th. Whenever you see that day we came out of Egypt, it's talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. When we came out of Egypt. Go ahead.
Out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten.
See? There shall no leavened bread be eaten. You never hear us leaving out of Egypt being associated with you got to roast a lamb with fire. Or us leaving out of Egypt, you have to eat bitter herbs. Because that's for the Passover itself, not unleavened bread. Go ahead.
Verse 4. This day came ye out in the month of Abib.
Right, we came out in the month of Abib. Even when you see this right here, that we came out in the month of Abib, that's always associated with unleavened bread. It's because it represents us coming out. Just like the Passover is the death angel passing over our houses and saving us alive, coming out of Egypt is associated with the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Go ahead.
Verse 5. And it shall be, when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast to the Lord.
Right.
Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with thee, neither shall there be any leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters.
See, so you see how it goes together? The unleavened bread is us coming out. Us coming out. Passover is the angel passing over the children of Israel. Give me verse, keep going.
Verse 8. And thou shalt show and thou shalt show thy son in that day, saying, This is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt.
When I came forth out of Egypt. You're going to tell your child, this is done because we came out of Egypt. Now, real quick, just to prove a point, go back to chapter 12 and verse 26.
Book of Exodus chapter 12 and verse 26. And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, What mean ye by this service?
Now, this is dealing with Passover. When your child asks you about why we doing this, why we putting the blood over there, why we roasting this lamb with fire, why we eating bitter herbs and unleavened bread. Go ahead.
Verse 27. Then ye shall say, It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. And the people bowed their head and worshiped.
Right. Notice it said, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt. In Egypt. But unleavened bread is about us coming out of Egypt.
Right.
Now back to Exodus 13. Stay right on the same type of point. Go down to verse 14.
Book of Exodus chapter 13 and verse 14. And it shall be when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, What is this? That thou shalt say unto him, By strength of hand the Lord brought us out from Egypt, from the house of bondage.
It's that simple. Go ahead.
Verse 15. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that openeth the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem.
All right, you can drop that. So you see how one, the feast of the Passover, which is lamb roasted with fire, unleavened bread, bitter herbs. And you do it in your house with your family. And if your family is too small, then you invite your neighbor and they keep it together.
Right.
Those are the ordinances for Passover. Then the ordinances for Feast of Unleavened Bread is you can't have no leaven in your house for 7 days. You can't eat nothing with leaven for 7 days. The first day is a holy convocation. The last day is a holy convocation. See why it's so important to read throughout all of this stuff instead of just going to 1 or 2 precepts thinking that you got it all. But that's not the case. So that's why we had to go over chapter 12. We should have went over the whole thing in chapter 11 too. We just hit parts. But chapter 11, chapter 12, and chapter 13. And leading up to this, we went through Exodus 1 all the way to chapter 10. So now we're done in the book of Exodus. Let's go to Numbers, chapter 9. So while we were in the wilderness, we did not keep the Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread every year. We only did it twice. So here's the second time. Let's go to Numbers chapter 9, and we're going to start at verse 1.
And the book of Numbers chapter 9 and verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the 2nd year, after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season, in the 14th day of this month at even.
At the 14th day of this month at even, meaning the beginning of the day. Keep going.
Ye shall keep it in its appointed season, according to all the rites of it.
See, all the rites of it. That's everything that's associated with Passover. Passover is not you eating unleavened bread for 7 days. It's 1 day. Go ahead.
And according to all the ceremonies thereof shall ye keep it.
Come on.
And Moses spake unto the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at even.
Notice you never hear anything about the 15th day right here. You don't read nothing about the 15th day. you know this 14th and even is the beginning of the 14th. Don't say nothing about the 15th. Now, I want to make another point while we're here. Since we're here, because this is gonna come into play. Jump down to verse 10.
Verse 10. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean.
Hold on. Go back up to verse 7 so they understand what's going on. But no, verse 6, man.
Verse 6, okay. Book of Numbers chapter 9 and verse 6. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. And those men said unto him, we are defiled by the dead body of a man. Wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering of the Lord in his appointed season among the children of Israel? And Moses said unto them, stand still, and I will hear what the Lord will command concerning you. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off.
Or in a journey far off. Like we're in a journey far off. Go ahead, that's another story.
Yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord.
Right, he shall keep the Passover of the Lord. Go ahead.
Verse 11. The 14th day of the second month at even, they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs.
So he was giving them the second month. So if you was unclean in the first month, you could do it the second month. Go ahead.
Verse 12. They shall leave none of it unto the morning, nor break any bone of it.
Those are ordinances of the Passover, not unleavened bread. Go ahead.
According to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it.
Go ahead, verse 12.
Verse 13.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But the man that is clean and is not in a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover.
Meaning he's refusing. He just don't want to do it. He being disobedient. Go ahead.
Even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering of the Lord in his appointed season. That man shall bear his sin.
Right, that man shall bear his sin. So, which meaning you'll get put to death. Read verse 14 too.
Verse 14. And if a stranger shall sojourn among you, and will keep the Passover unto the Lord, according to the ordinances of the Passover, and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. Ye shall have one ordinance both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land.
Right. So see how Passover has its own ordinances, its own statutes that go along with Passover. That's only for Passover. There was nothing in here about eating unleavened bread for 7 days. Nothing. And the first day and the last day being a holy convocation. There's nothing here, period, about a holy convocation. So that's that. It's undeniable. Now, let's go to Deuteronomy 16. Now, y'all gonna have to think on this one, because this one will confuse you. But remember, you have ordinances that only go with Passover. And we read them in chapter 12. So the main ones being your lamb roasted with fire, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs is what you eat. So Deuteronomy 16 and 1.
Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16 and verse 1. Observe the month of Abib.
Hold on. Observe the month of Abib. Now, every time we read observe the month of Abib, it's talking about us coming out of Egypt, leaving out of Ramses. Go ahead.
Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night.
See?
Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord thy God, of the flock and the herd, in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there.
So if you remember the ordinances that we've been over, then something should stick out right here at you. This is a problem. It says, thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover. So when we read in Exodus 12, it said you kill the Passover. Exodus 12 and 6 said you kill the Passover. Then Exodus 12 and 20, let's go back there real quick. Exodus 12 and 23 or 24. 21. Exodus 12 and 21.
Book of Exodus chapter 12 and verse 21. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover.
Right. So according to your families and kill the Passover. Now, right here, this is saying, Deuteronomy 16 and 2 is saying, sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord thy God, of the flock and of the herd. Of the flock and of the herd. So wait a minute. This is talking about sacrifices. This is not talking about you killing the Passover. So the question now is this really talking about Passover, or is it talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread? That's what we're trying to find out. Keep going.
Verse 3. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it 7 days.
No, verse, go back to verse 2.
Okay. Book of Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 2. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord thy God, of the flock and the herd, in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there.
So, it says, in the place which the Lord shall choose to place his name there. But the Passover itself, you kill it. Every man is supposed to kill it according to his house, and you eat it in your house. It's not saying that right here. Go ahead.
Verse 3. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it 7 days.
7 days? But the Passover is 1 day. Come on.
7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction, for thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt.
So it's saying came forth out of the land of Egypt. Every ordinance right here is not talking about the actual Passover with the lamb and the bitter herbs. This is talking about unleavened bread. These are ordinances of unleavened bread, but it's saying Passover. Keep the Passover. Keep going.
For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life.
I don't think this is talking about the Passover. It has to be talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Keep going.
Verse 4. And there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coast 7 days.
7 days. Go ahead.
Neither shall there anything of the flesh which thou sacrificed the first day at even.
Sacrifice.
Remain all night until the morning.
Sacrificed. Go ahead.
Verse 5. Thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates.
What? You can't sacrifice the Passover within your gates? But I thought that's what we did. We kept it in our houses, right? Keep going.
Thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. But at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name in, there thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even, at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt.
Out of Egypt, at the going down of the sun, in the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. This is, thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at. I swear that sounds like Exodus 12 in verse 18. But at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name there. So this is starting to make sense. Give me 2 Chronicles 6 and 6. Yeah, 2 Chronicles 6 and 6.
The book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 6 and verse 6. But I have chosen Jerusalem, that my name might be there, and have chosen David to be over my people Israel.
So the Lord chose Jerusalem to put his name there. So, Deuteronomy 16 and 6 again.
Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16 and verse 6. But at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name in,
Jerusalem, his temple in Jerusalem. Go ahead.
There thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even, at the going down of the sun.
At the going down of the sun.
At the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt.
Exodus 12 and 18. This should be making sense to y'all.
Book of Exodus chapter 12 and verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at even, ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even.
That's 7 days, right? The 14th at even meant the end of the 14th right here.
Correct.
To the end of the 21st. That's 7 days.
Correct.
So unleavened bread is 7 days right there. So it's giving you the starting point. So that's okay. It's making sense. It's making a lot of sense. Back to Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 7.
Book of Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 7. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt turn in the morning and go unto thy tents.
Hold on. Thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, and thou shalt turn in the morning and go into thy tent. So the Passover, you prepared it in the evening, and then you ate it that night in your house, roasted with fire, bitter herb. It's not saying that stuff right here. Let me check something, because verse 7 said, thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. Let me pull up Blue Letter. See something real quick. Deuteronomy 16 and verse 7. It says, Deuteronomy 16 and 7 in Blue Letter Bible. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, and thou shalt turn in the morning and go into thy tents. So this sounds like an all-night party to me. And you go in when the sun come up. Yeah, in the morning, so when the sun come up. Let me click on Tools. Starts off, it says, and thou shalt roast. I'm going to look that up. It says H1310. And it says to boil, cook, bake, roast, ripen, grow ripe. To boil, to cook, to be boiled, to be sodden. Sounds like a contradiction. Thou shalt roast and eat it. Thou shalt roast and eat it. So let's go to Exodus 12. I think it's verse 7 and 8. Because I don't think you can boil or Sidon the Passover lamb. Yeah.
8 and 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exodus 12, 8 and 9. Yeah.
The book of Exodus, chapter 12, and verse 8. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire.
Right. Roast with fire. It doesn't say you can boil it. Roast it with fire. Go ahead.
And unleavened bread. Mm-hmm. And with bitter herbs they shall eat it.
Go ahead.
Verse 9. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water.
Oh, so you can't boil the Passover lamb. Just finish that out.
But roast with fire, his head with his legs, and with the pertness thereof.
This can't be talking about Passover. This entire, let's go back to it. Exodus 16. Exodus 16 can't be talking about the Passover itself at all. It has to be talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So read verse 7 again.
Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16, and verse 7. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt turn in the morning and go unto thy tents.
So this is making a lot of sense now. Keep going.
Verse 8. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread.
So after this first night, you're going to eat unleavened bread 6 more days. Go ahead.
And on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord thy God.
A holy convocation.
Thou shalt do no work therein.
So this has to be talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's not talking about Passover at all. It's talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Read next verse.
Verse 9. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn.
Right. So this is it's no longer talking about it stops right there talking about Feast of Unleavened Bread. Yeah, because this is definitely talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now go down to verse
16.
Yeah, verse 16.
Book of Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 16. 3 times in a year shall all the males appear before the Lord thy God, in the place which he shall choose, in the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
That proves it. In the place he shall choose, meaning Jerusalem, you're going to keep this feast that we just read about. That's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's actually the Feast of Unleavened Bread and not Passover. Go ahead.
And in the Feast of Weeks, and in the Feast of Tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty.
Right, you can't appear before the Lord empty. That whole thing, this whole thing right here in chapter 16, is talking about the 3 times you got to come to Jerusalem. It's talking about each feast. And none of them is the Passover. It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, although it says Passover. It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread without a doubt. Now, let's go to... before we go to the New Testament, let's start out with 2 Chronicles 30. So now we're going to go to examples of the feast playing out. We're going to do 3 things. We just went over 1. Right now we're going to hit the brothers and sisters keeping the feast as it is written. And then after that, we're going to go to the New Testament and explain everything going on in the New Testament. But all of this stuff is to help you, so when we get to the New Testament, you can understand it. So we came here on the night of Passover. We're going right back to it. I only just briefly touched on some of the stuff that night because of today, so we can bring it out today. So we're going back to 2 Chronicles 30 and verse 13.
The book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 30 and verse 13. And there assembled at Jerusalem much people to keep the feast of unleavened bread in the 2nd month, a very great congregation.
Right, in the 2nd month. So you had brothers from Northern Kingdom were invited to come keep the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Go ahead. No, jump down to verse 15.
Verse 15. Then they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the second month.
Right. They kept the Passover on the 14th day of the second month, just like it's written in the law. Go ahead.
And the priests and the Levites were ashamed, and sanctified themselves, and brought in the burnt offerings into the house of the Lord.
Keep going.
Verse 16. They stood in their place after their manner, according to the law of Moses, the man of God. The priests sprinkled the blood which they received of the hand of the Levites. But there were many in the congregation that were not sanctified. Therefore the Levites had the charge of the killing of the Passovers for every one that was not clean, to sanctify them unto the Lord.
So this is why we went to Numbers 9. They were unclean. So in this instance, you had the northern kingdom was into idolatry. They were straight unclean, just straight up. They're unclean, doing who knows what. But because they were unclean, the Levites had the charge of killing the Passovers. Because the men are supposed to kill their own Passover and keep it in their own house. But because they were unclean, the Levites did it for them. Pay attention. Keep going.
Verse 18. For a multitude of the people, even many of Ephraim,
Northern kingdom,
and Manasseh,
Northern kingdom,
Issachar,
Northern kingdom,
and Zebulun,
Northern kingdom,
had not cleansed themselves, yet did they eat the Passover otherwise than it was written.
Yet they did eat the Passover. They ate the Passover. Go ahead.
But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, The good Lord pardon every one.
So they ate the Passover, but Hezekiah prayed on their behalf. He's the king. He was a righteous king. He prayed on their behalf. Go ahead.
Verse 19. That prepareth his heart to seek God, the Lord God of his fathers, though he be not cleansed according to the purification of the sanctuary. And the Lord hearkened to Hezekiah and healed the people.
Right. So the Lord hearkened to him and healed the people. That's the Passover that they killed on the 14th day. Now, go ahead.
Verse 21. And the children of Israel that were present at Jerusalem kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days.
See, that came afterward. They don't happen on the same day. They kept the Passover. Now they're keeping the feast of unleavened bread 7 days. Go ahead.
With great gladness. And the Levites.
Hold on. So it wasn't Passover they were celebrating with great gladness. It's the feast of unleavened bread, the holy convocation that you're celebrating with great gladness. Go ahead.
And the Levites and the priests praised the Lord day by day, singing with loud instruments unto the Lord.
Right now, 2 Chronicles chapter 35. Remember this stuff, y'all, because when we get to the New Testament, it's going to make a lot more sense. 35 and verse 1.
The book of 2 Chronicles chapter 35 and verse 1. Moreover, Josiah kept a Passover unto the Lord in Jerusalem, and they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month.
So they had the Passover on the 14th day. Notice you never see anything about the Passover being on the 15th day. Not once. Not once. It's always the 14th day. Now, give me verse. Watch this, y'all. Verse 11. Pick back up at verse 11.
All right. Verse 11. And they killed the Passover, and the priests sprinkled the blood from their hands, and the Levites flayed them. And they removed the burnt offerings, that they might give according to the divisions of the families.
So they removed the burnt offerings. They removed the burnt offerings. So every day, hold on real quick, Exodus 30 real quick. I'm so glad the Lord put on my spirit to start studying laws. Exodus 29 in verse 36. Start at verse 36.
Book of Exodus chapter 29 and verse 36. And thou shalt offer every day a bullock for a sin offering.
Every day. Every day. Go ahead.
For atonement. And thou shalt cleanse the altar when thou hast made an atonement for it, and thou shalt anoint it to sanctify it. 7 days thou shalt make an atonement for the altar, and sanctify it, and it shall be an altar most holy. Whatsoever toucheth the altar shall be holy.
Keep going.
Verse 38. Now this is that which thou shalt offer upon the altar, 2 lambs of the first year, day by day continually.
Day by day continually. Go ahead.
Verse 39. The 1 lamb thou shalt offer in the morning.
1 in the morning.
And the other lamb thou shalt offer at even.
1 in the evening.
And with the 1 lamb, a 10th deal of flour.
Jump down to verse 42 so you get the point.
Verse 42. This shall be a continual burnt offering throughout your generations, at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord, where I will meet you to speak there unto thee.
Right. So you see, there's all these offerings that have to be made daily, every single day. So back to 2 Chronicles 35 and verse 12.
Book of 2 Chronicles chapter 35 and verse 12.
Remember, they're killing the Passovers so that the people's unclean, so they had the charge of killing the Passovers. The Levites did. That's outside of the offerings that they have to make every single day continually. Go ahead.
Book of 2 Chronicles chapter 35 and verse 12. And they removed the burnt offerings, that they might give according to the divisions of the families of the people, to offer unto the Lord, as it is written in the book of Moses.
Right, so they removed those offerings that they had to make daily. Why? Because the lamb has to be roasted with fire. Go ahead.
And so did they with the oxen. Verse 13. And they roasted the Passover with fire.
Like they supposed to. These other offerings, you can boil them. Go ahead.
According to the ordinance. But the other holy offerings saw they in pots.
Saw they in pots. Like the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you can do those in pots. You can sieve that, whatever you want to call it, boil it. But the Passover itself has to be roasted. Go ahead, finish that out.
And in cauldrons and in pans, and divided them speedily among all the people.
Right, but the Passover itself, the Passover lamb has to be roasted with fire. That's done on the 14th. Now, give me verse 17.
Verse 17. And the children of Israel that were present kept the Passover at that time.
So they kept the Passover, then what?
And the Feast of Unleavened Bread 7 days.
Right, 2 different things. So we get to the New Testament, we're going to read that damn near verbatim. But brothers have not studied. All right, Ezra 6. This is precept upon precept. Give me verse 19.
The book of Ezra, chapter 6, and verse 19. And the children of the captivity kept the Passover upon the 14th day of the first month.
You just can't get around it. You cannot get around it. You keep the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. The 14th day starts at even, it ends at even. Make no mistake about it. Now jump down to verse. No, just keep going because it's a different account, but it's the same thing being repeated. Go ahead.
Verse 20. For the priests and the Levites were purified together. All of them were pure, and killed the Passover for all the children of the captivity, and for their brethren the priests, and for themselves.
Keep going.
And the children of Israel, which were come again out of captivity, and all such as had separated themselves unto them from the filthiness of the heathen of the land, to seek the Lord God of Israel, did eat.
Right. So they ate the Passover. Go ahead.
Verse 22. And kept the Feast of Unleavened Bread 7 days with joy.
With joy. Again, like how can you get around this, brothers and sisters? Come on, keep going.
For the Lord had made them joyful, and turned the heart of the king of Assyria unto them, to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel.
Mm-hmm. All praises to the Most High. Now, let's go to Esdras. First Esdras 1 first. I'm just going to touch this. So we read 2 Chronicles. This is the same account right here in First Esdras 1. Just read verse 1.
The book of First Esdras in the Apocrypha, chapter 1 and verse 1. And Josiah held the feast of the Passover in Jerusalem unto his Lord, and offered the Passover the 14th day of the first month.
Right, so this is dealing with Josiah. We read that in 2 Chronicles 35. Let's go to another one. Chapter 7. So this is when they return from captivity. So there's Haggai, Zechariah. See that in verse 3. But jump down to verse 10. First Ezra chapter 7 and verse 10.
Book of First Ezra chapter 7 and verse 10. And the children of Israel that were of the captivity held the Passover the 14th day of the first month. After that, the priests and the Levites were sanctified.
Go ahead.
Verse 11. They that were of the captivity were not all sanctified together, but the Levites were all sanctified together.
Go
and
ahead.
so they offered the Passover for all them.
For all them. So they did it for us. They killed the Passover for us again because the people were unclean. Go ahead.
Of the captivity, and for their brethren, the priests, and for themselves.
Go ahead.
And the children of Israel that came out of the captivity did eat, even all they that had separated themselves from the abominations of the people of the land, and sought the Lord.
Right. So they kept the Passover. Now, what comes the next day? The next night after the Passover? Verse 14.
Verse 14. And they kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days, making merry, joy. Go ahead. Before the Lord. For that he had turned the counsel of the king of Assyria toward them, to strengthen their hands in the works of the Lord God of Israel.
Right. It's plain and simple. It's just plain and simple, brothers and sisters. People can play with words, but you can't get around this. It's the law and the testimony. We read the law, and then you're watching it come to life. There's no way around it. So there are your examples. Now we're going to deal with the New Testament. Explain these scriptures that people can't explain. All right, so now we're going to the New Testament. We got a New Testament reader who is
Soldier Joab.
I call him Rock Diesel. But let's get into the New Testament and prove what we've read in the Old Testament, including the law. All of this is going to play out right before your eyes in the New Testament also. So Matthew chapter 26. Start at 1.
All right. This is the book of Matthew, chapter 26 and verse 1. And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover.
That's the 14th day. Go ahead.
And the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Verse 3. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas.
Yeah, Caiaphas. Go ahead.
Verse 4. And consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him.
Right, that they might take him by subtlety and kill him. Go ahead.
Verse 5. But they said, Not on the feast day.
Not on the feast day, meaning the feast of unleavened bread. The feast of unleavened bread, because that's the high holy day. Go ahead.
Lest there be an uproar among the people.
Right, because there will be an uproar among the people if you're in a festive feast day, a high holy day, a Sabbath day. Now let's go to jump down to verse 17. So this is the only way this stuff makes sense. You go back to the law and the prophets, the Chronicles, the Kings. You see it playing out. You see it. Go ahead.
The book of Matthew, chapter 26 and verse 17. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread.
Stop. The first day of the feast of unleavened bread is the 14th day when you keep the Passover. And then at the end of that, you start the feast of unleavened bread. Go ahead.
The disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, Well wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover?
Why doesn't it say where should we prepare that we eat the feast of unleavened bread? And we're gonna go through each account. You're not gonna see that. It's always the Passover itself. He had to die on the Passover. It's about him. Go ahead.
Verse 18. And he said, Go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, The master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house.
Hold on. I will keep the Passover at thy house. Why he not going up to the temple at Jerusalem? I will keep it at thy house. But we read in Deuteronomy 16, you can't keep it in your house. That's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Go ahead.
I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. Verse 19. And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover.
They made ready the Passover. The sacrifices for unleavened bread have to be done by the priest. Those are sacrifices. They have to do them. Hold on, bro. Since I said it, Numbers 28. Real quick, verse 16.
The book of Numbers, chapter 28 and verse 16. And in the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Lord.
The Passover's first. Go ahead.
Verse 17. And in the 15th day of this month is the feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten.
Come on.
Verse 18. In the first day shall be an holy convocation.
Yep.
Ye shall do no manner of servile work therein.
That's the day. If they had killed Christ on that day, there would have been an uproar among the people.
Right.
Go ahead.
Verse 19. But ye shall offer a sacrifice made by fire.
Ye shall make a sacrifice. Go ahead.
For a burnt offering unto the Lord.
Can we do burnt offerings?
No.
The Levites had to do burnt offerings. Right. Go ahead.
2 young bullocks and 1 ram, and 7 lambs of the first year. They shall be unto you without blemish. Verse 20. And their meat offering shall be of flour mingled with oil. 3/10 deals shall ye offer for a bullock, and 2/10 deals for a ram.
Burnt offerings and meat offerings. Do you do that on the Passover?
No, you do not.
Go ahead.
Verse 21. A several 10th deal shalt thou offer for every lamb throughout the 7 lambs.
So you got to offer up 7 lambs. Do you do that on Passover?
No, you do not.
Go ahead.
Verse 22. And 1 goat for a sin offering to make an atonement for you.
And so you got to have a goat too.
Right.
That was on that. You got to do this 7 days. Christ was the scapegoat on Passover. He was the scapegoat. We're going to read that too. That was on Passover, not Feast of Unleavened Bread. We can drop that. Everybody should understand by now. Back to Matthew. Matthew 27. Matthew 26, I'm sorry. So they made ready the Passover. Like it said in Exodus 12 and 6. You shall kill it in the evening. So leading up to the 14th day, you're going to kill it. Pick back up at, read 19 again.
26:19?
Yeah, 26 and 19.
All right. The book of Matthew, chapter 26 and verse 19. And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 20. Now when the even was come, he sat down with the 12.
So he sat down with the 12. He's doing it just like you're supposed to do in the law. Verse 21.
Verse 21. And as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me.
Right. So the point is, they sat down and they ate. Now, let's go to chapter 27. Give me verse. Give me verse 15.
The book of St. Matthew, chapter 27 and verse 15.
Mm-hmm.
Now at that feast, the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner, whom they would.
Right. A scapegoat. Jump down to verse 20.
The book of Matthew, chapter 27 and verse 20. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus.
Now, aren't the chief priests, the Levites, aren't they the ones that have to offer up the lamb? Mm-hmm. They offering Christ. Like, no, not Barnabas, Christ. Kill Christ. Go ahead.
Verse 21. The governor answered and said unto them, Whether of the twain will ye that I release unto you? They said, Barabbas. Verse 22. Pilate said unto them, What shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? They all say unto him, Let him be crucified.
Let him be crucified. Kill the Christ. He had to die that day. Verse 25. Verse 26.
Verse 25. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Verse 26. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified.
So Christ was crucified. That had to happen on Passover too. He is the scapegoat for Israel. He was the goat for the Lord. He took our sins on his head on Passover. Now let's go to verse 57.
The book of St. Matthew, chapter 27, verse 57. When the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea, named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. Verse 58. He went to Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered.
Right. So if a man is hung on a tree, he has to be off of that tree and buried the same day, like it says in Deuteronomy chapter 21 and 23, verse 23. Go ahead.
Verse 59. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 60. And laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. Verse 61.
Right. So this day that they're in is Passover. And it's also the preparation day for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's the preparation day for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, jump to verse 62.
Verse 62. Now the next day that followed, the day of the preparation.
So the day after the preparation is the day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now watch what these brothers do that got the devil on them.
The chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that deceiver said, while he was yet alive, After 3 days I will rise again. Verse 64. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, He is risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first.
Right. So during that first day, Pilate, they go to Pilate. He has his soldiers go and put a seal on the door so nobody can get in. And he set up guards. And after 3 days, Christ said he was going to rise. So they did that particular day. Now, 28 and 1.
The book of St. Matthew, chapter 28 and verse 1. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre.
So now they came on Sunday morning as the sun was about to come up. Christ is already gone. So that day after the preparation day, that was Wednesday night. That started the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Mark 14. I'm just going to go through these in the Gospels and explain this stuff. Verse 1, 14 and 1, 14, 1 and 2.
The book of St. Mark, chapter 14 and verse 1. After 2 days was the feast of the Passover and of unleavened bread.
Now we read in Matthew, it said after 2 days was the feast of the Passover. It didn't say both of them. But you know both of them are right there together. One is on the 14th, the other's on the 15th. Keep going.
And the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might take him by craft and put him to death. Verse 2. But they said, not on the feast day.
Not on the day of unleavened bread. Not on that feast day. We got to get him on Passover. Not on the feast of unleavened bread. Go ahead.
Lest there be an uproar of the people.
Right. Lest there be an uproar of the people. Now jump down to verse 12.
The book of St. Mark, chapter 14 and verse 12. And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover.
They killed the Passover on the 14th. That's why we went to several examples to show you they killed the Passover on the 14th. Go ahead.
His disciples said unto him, where wilt thou that we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover?
Mayest eat the Passover. Why doesn't it say where we're going to eat the Feast of Unleavened Bread? It's Passover. Passover. All right, for chapter 15. Give me verse 7.
The book of St. Mark, chapter 15 and verse 7. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. Verse 8. And the multitude crying aloud began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. Verse 9. But Pilate answered them, saying, will ye that I release unto you the King of the Jews? Verse 10. For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy. Verse 11.
Right, no, you're good right there. So Barabbas, this is the same account. This is the scapegoat. All of this is happening on the day of Passover as it was supposed to happen. Now give me verse... So Christ is crucified. Now give me verse... pick up at 41. Okay.
The book of St. Mark, chapter 15 and verse 41. Who also, when he was in Galilee, followed him, and ministered unto him, and many other women which came up with him unto Jerusalem. Verse 42. And now when the even was come.
So this is before it got dark. Because according to the law, he had to be down, wrapped in linen, and buried in a sepulchre before the day is over. Go ahead.
Because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath.
The day before the Sabbath. What Sabbath? It's not the weekly Sabbath. Because the weekly Sabbath is going to be 3 days later. Well, it's going to be at least 2.5 days later. Or 2 days later. 2 days later. So it's not the preparation of the weekly Sabbath. Go ahead.
Verse 43. Joseph of Arimathea, honorable.
Hold on. I got to make this point.
Okay.
Because some people said that it's the weekly Sabbath. Admitting that he died on Wednesday, but saying that they're preparing for the weekly Sabbath. But it says the day before the Sabbath. The day before the Sabbath. Not 2 or 3 days before the Sabbath. The day before the Sabbath. The day that they are in is the day before the Sabbath. That means the next day after Passover is a Sabbath.
Right.
It's that simple.
Right.
You can't unexplain it. Go ahead.
Verse 43. Joseph of Arimathea, honorable counselor, which also waited for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate and craved the body of Jesus.
So Joseph of Arimathea was an honorable counselor. That means he kept the commandments, right?
Nice.
Okay.
Verse 44. And Pilate marveled if he were already dead. And calling unto him the centurion, he asked him whether he had been any while dead. Verse 45. And when he knew it of the centurion, he gave the body to Joseph.
So he had the body given to Joseph. Go ahead.
Verse 46. And he bought fine linen.
Pause. So if they're in Passover, and Passover is a Sabbath, this honorable counselor, why would he buy fine linen? Matter of fact, I'm going to go to the Strongs. I'm going to go to the Blue Letter. Yep. Going to the Blue Letter. In verse 46, he brought fine linen. Okay, we'll move right along. He bought as G59. And that means to buy. To buy. So Joseph of Arimathea bought. He bought fine linen. Go ahead, finish that out.
The book of St. Mark, chapter 15 and verse 46. And he bought fine linen, and took him down, and wrapped him in the linen, and laid him in a sepulchre which was hewn out of a rock, and rolled a stone under the door of the sepulchre. Verse 47. And Mary Magdalene...
No, you good. So, before it got dark, he was given the body. He wrapped him in fine linen that he purchased. So it couldn't have been a Sabbath day like people think. And then he buried him in the sepulchre. All right, so now let's go to Luke chapter 22 and verse 1. We did Matthew, we did Mark, we're going to do Luke, and we're going to do John. So Luke 22 and verse 1.
The book of St. Luke, chapter 22 and verse 1. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover.
So some people call the whole event the Passover. Some people call the whole event unleavened bread. It doesn't matter because they one after the other. The 14th is the Passover and the 15th is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Go ahead.
And the chief priests and scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people.
Mm-hmm. So we read this in the other accounts too. They were afraid that if they take him on the feast day, meaning on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that it would be an uproar among the people because that's a high, holy day. He had to die on Passover, as it is written. Now, verse 7, watch this.
The book of St. Luke, chapter 22 and verse 7. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed.
Now, what day is that? It's the 14th, because we read it. And they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. It should be obvious what day that is. So you know the 14th is the Passover of the Lord. Then the 15th starts the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's that simple. It shouldn't be no confusion. Now go down to just keep going.
Okay.
Just keep going.
Verse 8. And he sent Peter and John, saying, Go and prepare us the Passover, that we may eat. Verse 9. And they said unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare? Verse 10. And he said unto them, Behold, when ye are entered into the city, there shall a man meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he entereth in. Verse 11. And ye shall say unto the goodman of the house, The master saith unto thee, Where is the guest chamber?
The guest chamber. Mm-hmm.
Where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples.
Right, so evidently they done rented them a guest chamber for them to eat the Passover in this house. Not at the temple. It's not a holy convocation. It's him and the disciples. That's his family right here. His mother, his brother, and his sister. Go ahead.
Verse 12. And he shall show you a large upper room furnished. There make ready.
Go ahead.
Verse 13. And they went and found as he had said unto them. And they made ready the Passover. Verse 14. And when the hour was come, he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him. Verse 15. And he said unto them, With desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer.
All right, you good. You notice every single time it said Passover, never said unleavened bread. He did not sit down and have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Every single time, every single account is Passover, which is the 14th, with your lamb roasted with fire. Unleavened bread and bitter herbs shall ye eat it. Every single time. Now, Luke chapter 23. Give me Luke 23 and 15. Okay. It's going right back to the scapegoat. It's in every single account. Go ahead.
The book of St. Luke, chapter 23 and verse 15. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. Verse 16. I will therefore chastise him and release him.
Go ahead.
Verse 17. For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast.
See, so on Passover, they would always release one of the prisoners. You have a scapegoat, and you got the one that goes free. Christ was the scapegoat. He took the sins upon his head. Go ahead.
Verse 18. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas.
Right, crucify Christ, crucify him, give the murderer to us, let him go free.
Wow.
All right, now let's go to verse 50. So Christ is giving up the ghost. We're going right back to Joseph of Arimathea. Luke 23 and 50.
The book of St. Luke, chapter 23 and verse 50. And behold, there was a man named Joseph, a counselor, and he was a good man and a just.
Right, good and just, keeping commandments. Howbeit, he bought fine linen, on Passover,
Right.
showing it's not a Sabbath. Go ahead.
Verse 51. The same had not consented to the counsel and deed of them. He was of Arimathea, city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. Verse 52. This man went unto Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Verse 53. And he took it down and wrapped it in linen and laid it in a sepulchre that was hewn in stone, wherein never man before was laid. Verse 54.
Verse 54.
And that day was the preparation.
That day was the preparation. The Passover is the day of preparation for the feast of unleavened bread. You can't get around this. It's not the same day. There's no discrepancies in the scriptures. It's always in our minds. That's where the problem is, in our minds. Go ahead.
And the Sabbath drew on.
Right, the Sabbath drew on because it was the next day. Once it got dark outside, it was the next day. That's the beginning of your feast of unleavened bread. All right. Last one, Book of John. John chapter 13. Every single account is saying the same thing. What we have been taught is not saying the same thing. That's the problem. John chapter 13 and verse 1.
The book of St. John, chapter 13 and verse 1. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them until the end.
Right, that's the disciples that the Father gave him. You read about it in Isaiah chapter 8. Verse 2.
Verse 2. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him.
Right, so, and supper being ended. So Passover is now over. They have eaten the Passover. It's done. They've had their lamb, their bitter herbs, their bread. It's over now. Supper's over. Go ahead.
Verse 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God, and went to God. Verse 4. He riseth from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel, and girded himself.
So he rose up from supper. Okay, now jump down to verse 26. Now they're talking about Judas. Y'all pay attention.
Excuse me. The book of St. John, chapter 13 and verse 26. Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot.
Right, showing that Judas was going to be the one to betray him. But they didn't understand this yet. Go ahead.
The son of Simon. Verse 27. And after the sop, Satan entered into him. Then said Jesus unto him, That thou doest, do quickly.
So, Judas, what you going to do? Go and do it quickly. Go ahead. Go on about your business. Go ahead.
Verse 28. Now no man at the table knew for what intent he spake this unto him.
So they didn't really understand what was going on. So now they're going to ponder in their thoughts. Let's see what their thoughts are. Verse 29.
Verse 29. For some of them thought because Judas had the bag.
So Judas had the bag. I mean, he had the money, right? Go ahead.
That Jesus had said unto him, Buy those things.
What?
Buy those things.
Buy those things. But I thought that the Passover itself is a Sabbath day. You know, ain't no buying and selling on the Sabbath day.
Right.
Go ahead.
Buy those things that we have need of against the feast.
What feast? What feast?
The feast of unleavened bread.
Right. What would you be going to buy for Passover? You need to buy stuff for the feast of unleavened bread. Read again from the top.
The book of St. John, chapter 13 and verse 29. For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, that Jesus had said unto him, Buy those things that we have need of against the feast. Or that we should, or that he should give something to the poor.
All right, you good. You good.
Okay.
Figure that one out. If they both on the same day, something ain't right here. You think the disciples that the Lord gave Christ the disciples, and they're going to just walk around in the midst of sin? No, Christ will rebuke them sharply and quickly. Chapter 15. No, chapter 19. Oh, I love chapter 17. You know what lost in all this year, y'all, because it's just all this confusion going on, is the sacrifice that Christ made for us. The pain, punishment, and torture that he took for us. Hold on. Before we're going to come back to John 19. Let's go back to Luke 23 real quick. Christ knew the punishment he was going to have to go through, all the pain that was going to be inflicted upon him, because he read it. He definitely read it in the book of Psalms. Now, Luke chapter 23. I'm sorry, Luke chapter 22 and verse 37.
Okay. The book of St. Luke, chapter 22 and verse 37. For I say unto you that this that is written must yet be accomplished in me.
So what is written, this that is written must be accomplished in me. Go ahead.
And he was reckoned among the transgressors, for the things concerning me have an end.
So he knew he had to come and give his life, that he was going to be that sacrifice. He knew that. That's why Christ sweated blood, knowing the things he had to go through. But he waited his whole life to have that Passover, to do what he was sent to do. John 19. Watch this, y'all. Before we hit John 19, John 18 and 39. Okay. Same thing, y'all. So the same day that Christ dies, he is that scapegoat. So the other one, the two goats, one goat has to be released. 39 and 40.
The book of St. John, chapter 18 and verse 39. But ye have a custom that I shall release unto you one at the Passover.
At the what?
At the Passover.
At the what?
At the Passover.
At the Passover, not the Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover. At the Passover. Go ahead.
Will ye therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews?
Christ. Go ahead.
Verse 40. Then cried they all again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
Right. They chose a robber rather than the Prince of Life. John chapter 19, give me verse 14.
The book of St. John, chapter 19 and verse 14. And it was the preparation of the Passover.
Wait a minute. But they kept the Last Supper or Passover in John chapter 13. And he rose from supper, right? Mm-hmm. So what is this preparation for? The Feast of Unleavened Bread that's being called Passover. Go ahead.
Verse 14, and it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said unto the Jews, behold your king. Verse 15.
No, you good. Now, jump down to... Pick back up at 36, because we're almost done.
Okay. The book of St. John, chapter 19 and verse 36. For these things were done, that the scripture should be fulfilled. A bone of him shall not be broken. Verse 37. And again another scripture saith, they shall look on him whom they pierced.
Zechariah. Go ahead.
Verse 38. And after this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, besought Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate gave him leave. He came, therefore, and took the body of Jesus.
Right. Deuteronomy 21 verse 23. Because we keep reading this, let's go to it. Yep, Deuteronomy 21 and give me 22 and 23.
The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 22 and verse 22. And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree.
Now Christ did not commit a sin worthy of death, but he took that sin upon his own head. He took the sins for the children of Israel upon his own head. Go ahead.
Verse 23. His body shall not remain all night upon the tree. But thou shalt in any wise bury him that day.
Bury him that day. So he had to be buried before this day went out. We keep reading this, but we had to come here to show that. Now back John 19 and verse 39.
The book of St. John, chapter 19 and verse 39. And there came also Nicodemus, which at the first came to Jesus by night, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pound weight. Verse 40.
Go ahead.
Then took they the body of Jesus, and wound it in linen clothes with the spices, as the manner of the Jews is to bury. Verse 41. Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new sepulchre, wherein was never man yet laid.
Go ahead.
Verse 42. There laid they Jesus, therefore, because of the Jews' preparation day.
Because of the Jews' preparation day. They're preparing for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's about to get dark, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread celebration is about to come in. Go ahead.
For the sepulchre was nigh at hand.
Right. Now, verse 31.
The book of St. John, chapter 19 and verse 31. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation, that the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day. For that Sabbath day was an high day.
That Sabbath was an high day, so it's not the weekly Sabbath. Christ had to be down off the cross and buried by the time the day switched over. That day was a high day. Go ahead.
Besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away.
So you see how every single thing lines up. There's not a single contradiction to the law and to the testimony. 100%. Everything lines up. 100%. Last scripture. 1 Corinthians 5, 6 and 7.
The book of 1 Corinthians. I'm sorry. The book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 5 and verse 6. Your glory.
Verse 7, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. The book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 5 and verse 7. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us.
Right, Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. The Passover is first. Then after the Passover, you have what? The Feast of Unleavened Bread. Read.
Verse 8. Therefore, let us keep the feast.
Therefore, let us keep the feast. We're in the Feast of Unleavened Bread right now. Read.
Not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth.
Right. Get the leaven out of your bread and get the leaven out your temple, meaning you. So now you understand Passover. Now you understand the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I don't know what else to say. If you don't get it, you just don't get it. But all praises to the Most High for the understanding that he has given us. So I'm Brother Jacob.
And I'm Brother Joab.
Brother Jeremiah.
With that, y'all, we say Shalom.
What's going on, you guys? This is Judea, and I have something amazing to tell you guys. I want to introduce to you Showing Charity on Wheels. Showing Charity on Wheels is a non-profit organization helping our communities fight against hunger. It's a mobile food pantry that travels to various locations in Virginia. To name a few, you have Richmond, Petersburg, Chesterfield, and other local areas. Showing Charity on Wheels' goal is to help provide nutrition and healthy food in our communities. To get access to that, you can visit our website at www.showingcharityonwheels.com and fill out the sign-up sheet, or you can also donate on our website, or you can use our Cash App, $Showing Charity OW. Every helping hand matters.